Hey, Chris, how are you?
What's up, Ike? How you
How you
doing?
been? I'm good. Just coming down now from all that holiday stuff and traveling, so I'm taking a little breather.
Yeah, I have to just tell everyone how amazing your Christmas show was at the Copacabana in New York City.
Oh, yeah,
You seem to get it better and better each year.
this was so much fun. I had 11 costumes, and I want to just I have to give a shout out to Richard, who was backstage. He lined up every costume in and out.
Yeah, it was
It was
very
unbelievable.
smooth and the costumes were amazing. Have you thought about streaming that, by the way?
Someone asked before the show started because they weren't in Jersey or New York and they wanted to see it. So I felt bad, but I don't know. I feel like I'll lose ticket sales that way too if anybody is local.
Well,
I
maybe
don't want
you,
to.
yeah,
Or we could probably do it the day
or
of.
maybe do it after.
Yeah.
Put it online somewhere. Just, it would be nice, I think, for people to see what goes
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah. Well, I did have one wardrobe malfunction. I grabbed the
You
wrong
mean
wig.
when your penis slipped out?
Everyone ran. The Richter scale went right off. But I grabbed the wrong wig during the sexy, and I could not see for the life of me. For the life of me, I could not. I had to keep pushing the hair out of my face. I couldn't
Oh
see.
yeah.
It was
I just thought
hysterical.
that was part of your act.
No, it wasn't. And then the funny part was there was a really sexy Santa sitting in the chair, and I couldn't even get a good look at him.
That's
I was
right.
but it was good. It was always good to see you there, though, too, Chris.
That was great.
It's good. So, what's going on with you?
Oh, not much. We have our annual budget meetings. Those are always fun at my
Yeah.
job. But
Do they,
other than that, everything's just getting ready for Christmas.
yeah.
And
Do they at least serve liquor at those budget meetings?
well, I don't drink, so it wouldn't help me at all. I
Yeah,
wish they
but it's
would.
good to watch everybody else.
Yeah, I wish I could spike their eggnog.
Yeah. Call me. I'll help you. So listen, we were nominated. Loose Lips was nominated for the 19th annual People's Choice Podcast Awards. Of course, we lost, but we were still nominated, which was great.
It's a thrill to be nominated. That's what everyone says.
Yeah.
And I read that. I was very happy and proud for you guys. You've come a
Yeah.
long way.
Thrilled. And then, of course, as always, anybody who has any questions they want to ask Tim, of course, we got questions for Adam this week. Shoot any questions you want over to Ike Avelli Events at hotmail.com or just shoot us a DM on our Facebook page. And we are sponsored by Uberlube.
There you go.
I know. It's the gift that keeps on giving. And they were
People
great. They
Very
were
happy to get that at the show, by the way.
Oh, of course. Chris, I always take care of you. And they've also sponsored 50 Shades of Gay, we've got to mention too, for years now. So we're hoping for 2025 and just got booked on a cruise to do my show in February to Mexico.
Nice. Oh, that's amazing.
Royal Caribbean.
Very cool.
Yeah. So let's hope I don't turn into Natalie Wood.
I don't think Tim's going to push you off, right?
No, it's actually they already have the talent booked.
Oh, they do. Okay.
So I will be coming back in one piece. Is that what you're asking? Yeah.
That's good.
So, Chris, we're going to go right into it because this is one of our favorite times is when our guest is on our show because we love Sheena Easton, obviously.
Yeah. And this is his 10th appearance. Is that correct?
10th time he's going to be discussing the latest release of the Cherry Red campaign, which is the purple vinyl of Sheena Easton's 1987's No Sound But a Heart. And I see your hat, Chris, 87. Hello. Plus, speaking of purple, Adam has been working on some other incredible projects, and we're going to chat about that and what's next for our favorite diva, Sheena. Come on, welcome Adam Mattera.
Hi. Thanks for having me again. I can't believe it's the 10th time. I haven't been here now. A lot, haven't I?
You're becoming like Anne Margaret on the Tonight Show.
That's right.
Oh my God, welcome back.
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate
I mean, we're happy you're here, but we're also kind of sad. This is almost like I think the last of the re-release, almost close to it.
Well, I mean, kind of getting there. No, I think
Yeah.
there'll still be another year, maybe even certainly there'll be releases coming out next year. Yeah.
Yeah.
There may be
Good.
something after that. It depends on various factors. But there's more to come for sure. Yeah.
Good.
Very
more,
exciting.
definitely in the last leg.
Yeah. I got it since 2021, Adam. We have been. That's insane.
I know.
And we thank you so much for being a part of our show.
Oh my gosh. And just doing this is like you've made Sheena Easton fans around the world very happy these past few years.
I'm pleased. I hope so. Yeah, I hope so.
Oh yeah. And Chris, hold it up. Sold out.
It has. It's sold out. I think it almost sold out on pre-orders. Yeah. So I think there are a few left. I looked just before the podcast and I saw like there's 12 left on Amazon or something.
Yeah.
There's none left at Cherry Red. They're all gone.
Cherry Red's gone.
So now they're not going to reprint them, right? The vinyl is.
I actually emailed that to be confirmed.
Okay.
I think probably not. I think that was a limited edition run and that's it.
Okay.
Was this the quickest selling
Yes.
out? Yeah, right? I
Yeah.
figured that much.
Which kind of makes sense because it was the least of all the albums that she released in that era. It's the one, that and the Mexican album, the Spanish album, are probably the least widely available. And this one probably the least even lower because it just didn't get a mainstream release at the time for various reasons. It didn't come out in America.
Right. Well, that's the funny part because after Do You, she had a couple of like soundtrack recordings, Christmas All Over the World, So Far So Good. Then You Got the Look came out.
Yes.
And everyone was waiting for this album because when you see her on tour, she's talking about recording something new. You read it in Billboard. And then Eternity came out. And I thought,
exactly.
When I first heard it, I'm like, it wasn't my favorite. Again, it was one of those things where they picked that one out of so many incredible songs vocally on the album. And then I didn't care for the cover photo because I thought it looked like machinery all over again. But
the cover of the Eternity single.
Yeah, the 45 at the time. But then the album comes out.
Yes.
We can't get it. I, on a trek to Canada, I think it was the end of 1988 or beginning of 1989, got it on cassette and heard the entire thing for the first time and was through the roof. Right. Through the roof. It was amazing. What a great album.
A really good album, but solid. I mean, solid album. Interesting decision after the trajectory. I can't even speak. The trajectory she was going on, with Private Heaven, then Do You. She was moving into this kind of R&B based funk pop thing with ballads occasionally, but then this was a real kind of left turn. The choices, the selections they made into a much more adult contemporary, I suppose.
Right.
It was kind of like a return to the kind of stuff she'd had hits with a few years earlier.
Right. And that's how I felt like when Madness, Money, and Music started. You had that one song, and then you hear the rest, and you're like, did you guys not feel that way? Or?
Oh, I see what you mean, the comparison to Machinery, right. So that like Eternity didn't make sense in the context of the album. Yeah. No, that's true. But I think what happened with the album is a strange journey this record was on, because I believe what happened was So Far So Good came out the year after Do You, 1986.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really, set up to be the big lead single from her next album. Had it been a big hit, I think it would have been, because it was tied in with a movie, this About Last Night, Brat Pack movie. Was a very poppy sounding, fizzy pop, kind of How Will I Know Whitney Houston vibe thing. Mm-hmm. Very much in that vein. And of course it was Narada Michael Walden producing it, so same producer. So it totally fit in that mode. Everything was lined up. The movie association, the sound of it. It should have been a massive hit, but it wasn't. And I think what then happened was that the album they had started to make, because she was working in 86 on her next album with Narada, Michael Walden, with Nick Martinelli. And the sessions, when you actually go through, I've seen all the logs and seen when things were recorded and where. There was a whole bunch of recording going on through 86 into 87 for this album. And there were different configurations of what the album would be. And I feel what seems to have happened is that they lost confidence. The tracks that were unreleased are in a much more compatible with that up-tempo pop sound.
Okay.
Some of which I managed to get, which I did get released for the first time on that very first release we did. Anything Can Happen was one of them. And the other one was Sweet Talker.
Yeah.
They're both on there. And so that kind of is a flavour of what the record would have been. And I think they must have just thought, oh, that didn't work. She's had hits with adult contemporary stuff, and she's got like a staple. The radio, adult contemporary radio, plays her. Let's really serve them and go in that direction. I mean, they're all great songs. And probably the Eternity thing would have been, Prince has done a track. We can't not put a Prince track on. I mean, Prince is so hot. And it, oddly, you know, like you say, you mentioned You Got the Look. Eternity came out. You Got the Look was a huge hit internationally, but Eternity, you know, another collaboration with Prince within a release in a few months of it, a few months earlier, I think, you know, couldn't get anywhere. It couldn't get played. Maybe it was too odd. I love it, but I think it's just too odd, maybe, for pop radio. It's such a strange record.
Now, was that coming off of Rush Rush by Paula Abdul? Because it gave me that kind of whole...
No, Rush Rush came out in 91.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this was pre-Paula.
Okay. That's right, yeah.
Yeah, I think, you know, there was such expectation for Do You. And I think when Do You failed to impact, you know, there was a little bit of what happened, probably a look back, right? And one of the things was probably, you know, when you match that very quick change in image in terms of her look, it came off as trying too hard. And then, you know, her and Niall had made a decision to record most of the songs in a lower part of her voice. So there was this whole thing. But I think you're right. I think the hope was, and rightfully so far so good, is probably of all her singles, the biggest disappointment in terms of it's clearly a hit. I mean, it's clearly a song that, if it had been played on the radio, would have been, you know, a hit. People would have liked it. It's just so catchy. I think you interviewed Narada, and he had said the same thing, that regardless of what happened, that song was a hit. Like that, they recorded it.
No, I did speak to him, and I spoke to him at length about him working with Sheena. I mean, he loved working with her. He was one of his main prime memories of her was just what an athlete she was, both physically. She was really getting into her fitness and training at the time, but also in the studio, she would have such energy and just, you know, want to do take after take, and was such a powerful singer. Yeah. Which I think is an impression a lot of people got, because sometimes people have the impression of her. I remember speaking to Junior Giscombe, who wrote, you know, Mummy used to say, Junior. Talking to him when he wrote Don't Turn Your Back for Do You. He had a similar impression. People's understanding of Sheena could sometimes be like, oh, she's a girl that sang 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Or something. And so they didn't really, when they were actually in the studio with her and heard her, they're like, oh my God, this woman isn't.
Yeah, they got a real understanding of her chops. Yeah. Yeah.
And Narada was totally like that. And really, they became really good friends for a while as well. You know, they were quite connected. Interestingly, one of the things he did say, it's just suddenly come back to me now, because he wrote a couple of songs. Pretty much most of the record, there's only one, I think, song from his sessions that didn't make it onto No Sound, but was shelved. One or two, maybe. So the bulk of this album, the album that was released, is him. Well, about half of it is him producing it. And one of the things he did say, which totally makes sense, I didn't realize it, was that Sheena was really into the idea of hearts at the time, which is why you have No Sound But a Heart, which is why you have Floating Hearts, which is a song that he wrote.
Yeah, which is
she was into that concept of, it was something she was really into. So there was kind of this heart theme going on.
Yeah.
So when they decided to go with So Far So Good, I think they all thought, all right, this is going to return her to the top 10. And then my understanding was the next single, the follow-up single to that, because I think you're right. I think if that had been a hit, it would have been on this album. And they followed it with the next single that would have led to the release of the album was Anything Can Happen.
Would have been Anything Happen.
Which is why you had that 12-inch remix of it. You had they had a single mix of it. The whole thing was prepped.
Yeah.
So then when that wasn't a hit, I think there was a rethinking, and also they wanted to distance themselves from, because it's hard to go to radio and say, this is going to be a hit. Can you play this song? When 3 months earlier, you had a song that didn't hit the charts. They paid a lot of attention to what the last song did, radio programmers. Sure. So they probably wanted to create a little distance. So they shelved Anything Can Happen. Yeah. And then January, because there's a fan letter from Sheena Easton in early 1987 where she talks about, I think, a February release of No Sound But a Heart.
It was.
She says it's produced by Keith Diamond and narrator Michael Walden. That means that only their songs made this album that was going to be released in February. And then that included, which you also found, the prep for the single of Sweet Talk, which had a club remix, a single mix. And so for some reason, that was scrapped. And then that, I think, is when the change came in to say, let's make this an album of ballads. And perhaps that was because when Do It for Love and So Far So Good failed, maybe there were some execs that were saying it's because it's so different from your original albums. You have to return to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
so I think that may have shaped and then there was a whole change in the lineup. I think Eternity is a great song. I think that it is very unique, but I think if it had been played on the radio, I think it would have been a hit. I think it was kind of like Love Thy Will Be Done by Martika.
Yes, it's more in that mode.
Very unusual, but I think people would have responded to it. I don't think there was something going on with the record company for a Sheena Easton record at that time to not make the Hot 100. Something is not right with the record company.
EMI America, that she was signed to EMI America in America, in the US, and that label was being dissolved and being absorbed, I think, into EMI Manhattan. So there's all kinds of corporate changes happening at the label, which have added to the disarray of what was going on. And the fact that there was these conflicting directions for which direction she should go in, and the fact the album didn't come out when it was first scheduled to come out and came out 6 months later, and then didn't come out in the US, it came out in Canada, it didn't come in. The whole thing was a huge mess.
Yeah, basically. and I love the Gateway folder single release. To me, that signaled that they were trying to like push this single, because it had the single was very unique. It had a sleeve that turned into a poster.
Yeah.
And it was by Herb Ritz, so it was so
they were spending money. I mean, like when you mentioned Sweet Talker, that track, I mean, that never got released. I mean, they did Shep Pettibone. It was the hottest remix of the day. He didn't produce it. He was brought in to remix it. So even that shows a level of, I mean, they were spending money to get the hottest remix in the world at that point for a track that never even got released.
No, and then the video seemed to have a good budget. The video that was shot for it also.
It's Mary Lambert, that video.
Yeah.
Mary Lambert, who was really famous for doing Like a Virgin for Madonna, amongst many other things. Yeah, the video is amazing for Eternity.
Yeah,
the video was great. I personally would have thought, if it wasn't going the direction they wanted to, they would have maybe went back to A Private Heaven and released Wanna Give My Love. I thought that's what my single choice would have been, or Still Willing to Try.
As a kind of halfway between the two. Yeah, and Wanna Give My Love was, I believe, a possible single, because there's a 12-inch mix of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of understand the thinking with how do you not, to me, if I'm listening to the album, right? And there's a song written by Prince, and it's that song with just this amazing vocal harmony. I can understand why they went with that, but I do see that it was confusing in terms of the sound of the album. I think Sheena actually even did some, first of all, she still had a tour because they had booked the tour with the assumption that the album was going to be released. So she was touring during that time without the album being on a release schedule.
Right.
And the tour book talked all about the album that never was released.
Right.
And she was doing tracks from the album in the show.
She did tracks from,
Eternity Live. You know?
Never did Eternity, though.
No, never did Eternity Live. I would imagine that's a hard track because of all the vocal harmonies.
No, you'd have to have the backing vocalist.
But she did some radio interviews, and she herself, when I remember there was one morning show she did, and they said, so tell us about the album, and they had just played Eternity, and she goes, well, it's nothing like this song you just heard.
Yeah.
Right.
And so she herself was kind of saying, it's not indicative of the album,
Right.
It's a single, but it's not.
It was a Prince name. Mm-hmm.
So,
and of course, the actually one thing is if you listen to, you can find online, you could find Prince's demo for Eternity.
Yes. Yeah.
And if you listen to his demo, what you realize is, and I had this conversation with David Leonard, who produced it, the track.
Yeah.
All those amazing harmonies, that's her. That's her and Randy Peterson, who was the vocal. That's not Prince.
Yeah.
It's totally Prince sounding and you could, but it's not on the demo. So
Right.
all that amazing.
Yeah, Randy did all that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
And it's so kind of the thing that Prince, I mean, it's very in keeping with the Prince sound.
Yes.
But it's all generated by Randy and Sheena. That's totally their own thing.
And it's really cool, the Shep Pettibone remix of Eternity. They actually went in and recut all the vocals for that remix, which was unheard of at the time. Those are not.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, if you listen to those vocals, they are not the same vocals that are on the single and album mix.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. So, and that was unheard of. Like even the background, there's some parts that are a little different even, but I up until that point, because really the person that really made that very popular to go in and do was Mariah Carey when she did it with Dream Lover.
Yes.
I think that was the first time someone went in and just completely revamped the song.
Yeah.
But that was the first remix that I am aware of that the artist went in and re-recorded the vocal. I think it may have been because the beat was a little bit quicker than that's on the album. So, but it's very interesting. If you listen to it back to back, you can hear that it's a different vocal.
Right. Interesting. I never really picked up on that. And of course, there's also on that single, which you mentioned, though, with the Herbert's poster, all that amazing stuff. There's also a track, which when Nada told me it was his favorite one he did with her, which was Shockwave.
Oh,
great.
And they didn't make it onto an album.
Yeah.
Because it's so like super funky. Again, very Prince. It was co-written by Jesse Johnson, who worked with Prince for years.
Oh, yeah.
Prince connection there. But that would have fit in to the original concept of what the album,
right,
the original direction they were going in.
Right. I think you found a single edit of No Sound But a Heart. So that would mean that at some point they were considering that as a release.
Wow, yeah. It would suggest that, yeah. And there are various mixes of No Sound But a Heart, actually. So that sounds like, although I don't know, that doesn't really sound like a single to me. But yeah, apparently it would suggest that. But then on all the TV shows at the time, from what I've noticed on YouTube, Still Willing to Try, which you mentioned, Ike, as one of what you'd have had. Yeah. That was the only song she performed on television from the album, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Which again,
I seen it. She did. I think it was Strut, right, Chris? And then Still Willing to Try. The next night, I went to go see her in Atlantic City because it was the No Sound But a Heart tour, and she did Still Willing to Try. She did No Ordinary Love,
right?
And I think she did one more,
Still in Love.
Still in Love. Yep. It was fabulous.
And that was of all the songs, I know Ike, you said "Want to Give My Love," which is a great song. Just a tough vocal.
Yeah. Vocals are incredible.
Yeah, she really just, even the verses, there's something about the way she's phrasing that just, it's very tough. And I'm sure it was a thrill for her to work with Phil Ramone, who produced, all these classic artists, but obviously Barbra Streisand, Billy Joel. So that was probably cool for her.
Yeah.
But the single that I would have chose, if I wasn't going to use Eternity, would be "No Ordinary Love." That was my favorite. It was like the revelation on the album for me. Like, to hear her lower range there and how soulful she sounds. And
so good.
I'm sure that was a thrill for her too, because it was a different type of song than she's used to getting and recording. And she just nails it. It's like a natural, doesn't sound like someone trying, which is always what's amazing about her. She can adapt to any genre and just sound natural in it. And that was co-written by James Ingram, who she wound up working and touring with for the Colors of Christmas tour.
Who, oddly, Eugene Wilde on the duet on the album, on What If We Fall in Love, sounds just like James Ingram.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That was a great song, too. Yeah. And I even, like you said, you mentioned Floating Hearts. What a great track that was to close out, right?
Yeah, like really atmospheric. And there's not a bad track on the album.
No.
There really isn't. No. But there's nothing to me that sounds like a hit. Like a radio hit. Not that they're bad. What was being played on the radio in 1987 in America, I don't see any of those tracks necessarily being an obvious radio hit.
It was an interesting time, though. Do you remember Friends and Lovers by Gloria Loring?
Yeah.
All right. So there was this big hit that out of nowhere, it was a ballad called "Friends and We Don't Have to Be Friends and Lovers."
Yeah.
And that, I think, of all the songs that were on the airways, probably maybe was the blueprint even of What If We Fall in Love. Like, the thinking was, there is a marketplace.
You're right. There were all those things like "Somewhere Out There" by Linda Ronstadt and James Ingram.
Yeah, and even Whitney Houston was having these ballads in between all the up-tempo songs when she would release singles. So I think that was probably, and Anita Baker.
I was just gonna say, because your "No Ordinary Love" would have been great to get the R&B audience again. Plus, it was Luther Vandross was hot, Anita Baker, Regina Bell.
That's true. It wasn't all Janet Jackson.
Sade.
Yes, there was that whole word. Yeah. So forget what I said about them not being. Yeah. So potentially in certain areas there were. Yeah. Right. There was potential for the sounds that she was making.
Yeah, the R&B portion, especially, she could have really got that audience again. And
yes, you're right. "No Ordinary Love," actually, there was which is on this re-release. It's a 12-inch version. Well, it was labeled the 12-inch version. Whether it was that suggests it was intended to be released as a single, I don't know. Or whether it's just the longer version that was edited down for
nice.
But it's a nice version. It's about a minute or two longer, I think.
Yeah.
Which is a nice version of that song.
Speaking of "Still in Love," we have a question from Alex, who said, on the original release of "No Sound But a Heart," Steve Perry is credited as a feature artist on the song. However, Alex noticed that Cherry Red's vinyl reissue lists featuring Kenny G instead.
Right. So no, it's not instead. It's as well as. No.
As well as.
Steve Perry is on it. So that's correct. Yes, Steve Perry was. But actually, when I spoke to Leonardo Michael Walden, he had no memory of. I asked him about Steve Perry, and he had no memory. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. It's just like, really? Was he really on there? Oh, I love Steve Perry. He's great. He couldn't remember him being in the studio. Well,
yeah, that's what Alex was also stating too, because Steve Perry's voice is so distinct. We don't really hear it on the track. So that's a lot of people question: was he really singing on that?
Was he really on it? Well, I think I don't know.
You can hear him. You can hear him, but very slightly, and not. It's not that you can't. You just can't tell it's Steve Perry. You can hear a male voice singing with her. There's still love, but like you just wonder. But I think Steve Perry just happened to be around, and they probably just say, "You want to jump in and do," but you would think that they would say, "Let's make it."
Haven't I seen a photograph of them together? Haven't I seen a photograph of Sheena and Steve Perry? Yeah,
Alex mentioned it as well. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it happened, but it was just put in.
Oh, it did. It definitely happened because they're all in the photo from the session.
Yeah.
Narada and all the musicians, Randy Jackson, and also Sheena thanks him on the liner notes. She in her letter on her fan club, she said
who in that recording session didn't say, "Let's make this a duet," right? Like
that's an odd choice.
That would have been a gold mine.
It's a really strange choice. It's like there's a Barbara Streisand album, Emotion, and on the title track Emotion, which is a single, it's the Pointer Sisters, who was at the peak of their fame.
Yeah.
But on the mix, you can barely hear them.
Yeah.
And it was such a weird choice to like have them and then mix them so far down you can't even know they're there.
Yeah.
It feels like a similar decision with Steve Perry. The reason it says featuring Kenny G on the re-release is because it did actually. I originally put Steve Perry, but I thought, wait a minute. Well, you can't really hear Steve Perry on here. And Kenny G is on there, but he was never given a featured credit. So I just thought it'd be nice to give him a featured credit because he's just so distinctly on the track because Narada was working with him at the time on that big, is it called Songbird? Whatever that first album that KG did.
Songbird.
That made it. They were doing it at the same time. And that's why Kenny ended up playing on that track. So I thought it'd be nice to give him a feature credit because he's quite, big.
Yeah.
So that's the story behind that.
So I'm going to keep going with the questions. We have another one from Andrew who said Adam's work has been amazing and that it's a true gift to all the Sheena fans. Just wanted to start it out by saying that. And that there were discussions on the way the album was going to go, which we just discussed. But he wanted to know, was the title going to stay the same? Do we know that? Was it going to be No Sound But a Heart if it was more dance-oriented?
I imagine it wouldn't.
I can tell you that it was going to be in the second, because obviously there was a first album, right, that was going to originally be released in the fall of 86. And I don't know what the title of that would have been, but the one that was going to be in January, which would have just had Narada's and Keith's tracks on it, that was going to be called No Sound But a Heart.
Right.
And so that didn't change from when because the album in January was going to have, if it was including Narada and Keith, it would have had up-tempo tracks on it. Sweet Talk would have been one of them, and Shockwave probably would have been on the album.
There was a sales thing that was put out at that point with a different configuration of the album. I've seen it, which was like January, early '87, which they put out as if it was going to come out, but it was a different track configuration, some of which didn't end up on what was finally released. So I think it went through different stages. I'm not 100% sure whether when she's doing all these songs and recording them, which starts in '86 and goes on until early '87, whether there's a specific decisions at any point being made. She's just in the studio doing songs. There isn't anyone necessarily having an overview saying this song is definitely and this song isn't. It's all a bunch of, and this is what will definitely be called, and all those decisions I think end up getting made towards the end. Really.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
it was interesting that the Nick Martinelli sessions in '86 were not going to be used for the album that was going to be released in '87. All those tracks that she recorded with him were not going to be on that January release.
Yeah.
Because it was only going to feature the songs that were by Narada and Keith.
Right.
And that was interesting to me, that because those are pretty strong too, at least the tracks I've heard.
Well, the only Martinelli song that made it to this final release there's only one, right?
Yeah.
Right? Two. The Last to Know is the only Nick Martinelli one.
Yeah.
I'm just checking.
Did he do? Yeah. He did. Anything Can Happen, right?
He did Anything Can Happen, yeah, and he did a bunch of other stuff as well.
Yeah,
which didn't come out. Did about 8, I think, songs in total. I'm not sure, 8 or 9. But the only one that actually made the cut to this final thing was The Last to Know.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, Nick Martinelli did 8 or 9 tracks with her?
Yeah, I think so. Let me have a look.
Wow.
I'm just doing
Oh,
a
I didn't know
research.
that there was that
Mm,
much.
There was
is
a
that
bunch.
some news broke here
Hold
first?
on, let me have a look. I could be lying. He did. 3, 4. Sorry, I'm lying. He did 5.
Okay.
Oh, still
5 I know of, which
5.
include The Last to Know,
Yeah.
which obviously was the only one that made the cut. Anything That Happened, which was going to be a single, but then never came out, and a few others. A track called "Rhythm of Romance," which has leaked.
Right.
Yes,
That was Nick
I love that
Martinelli.
song.
Sweet Talker was not Nick Martinelli; it was Keith Diamond.
It was Keith Diamond, yeah.
Yeah.
And now the Narada Michael Walden, where there were more tracks, obviously, than what we've heard.
Yeah, there were more with them. I'm just referring to my notes. Yeah.
One was a remake.
There were just
right?
2 that I know of. There were
Who?
2 other tracks that didn't.
Nick.
Well, 3 if you count Shockwave, which of course was a B-side.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So 2 additional Narada songs.
2
Okay.
additional Narada ones, yeah.
The Narada ones, did that include a remake?
No.
You
No?
don't have to say. No one's listening.
Who did
There
the remake?
was a remake. There was a remake of a thing, which I think we mentioned.
Yeah, we
in the past before.
discussed.
That was in the Nick Martinelli sessions.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
Was that? Oh, I think. Okay, I won't say anything because I don't want to put you on the spot.
Okay.
But at least we have some breaking news.
Yeah. So there's various stuff which is all.
Are there
From
any
the
Keith
era,
Diamond
but
tracks
all
that
these
weren't
pictures.
released?
Say again.
Are there any Keith Diamond tracks that were not released?
Hold on. Let me just refer to my notes here. No, the only one that wasn't. They all made the album apart from Sweet Talker.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, of Keith Diamond. Yeah.
So there could possibly be another set coming out.
And one more question. Phil Ramone. That was the one and only Phil Ramone session, correct?
As far as I'm aware at this point.
Oh,
Yeah.
that would be fabulous too. Oh, imagine Sharon.
Oh, wait. I do have one more question.
Yes.
I think there was talk that she went into the studio with Richard Perry. But there's nothing from you ever found with that, right?
I've never come across that. No.
Okay.
That'd be amazing. Richard Perry was, in that era, Richard Perry was obviously at the height of his. He had just pointed this and stuff, hadn't he?
Yeah, and I don't know that that's ever been confirmed. I just thought I read that somewhere online.
Never found any evidence. I've not come across that, no.
Okay.
Yeah. Of course, one thing I have got, which is quite interesting, a couple of no sound but heart interest. Oh, you got more questions? Sorry,
I do. I have one question from Mike Dubin. He's just asking, since we are nearing the end of the re-release campaign, have there been any thoughts of taking any of the albums or compilations and creating an Atmos mix version?
No. It's a short answer.
Yeah.
No, there hasn't been. I don't.
Sorry, Mike.
No.
Nah, I don't think so. Sorry.
No.
Yeah, I mean, to do that would be very expensive, and I think from what I don't have that, and it just might not be. I don't really. No, that hasn't been something we've talked about. No.
Okay. Want another question, Adam?
Is there another one?
Yeah, we have one from Kay.
Sure.
Kay wants to know, speaking of like Steve Perry and the background vocals, is there any list of who sang on No Ordinary Love? He believes Lisa Fisher was singing on there.
Oh, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised because Lisa Fisher worked a lot with Narada, didn't she? Oh, background vocals, yeah, it's listed on the thing.
Yeah, Lisa Fisher, yeah. BJ Nelson, Janice Dempsey, and Sheena Easton.
Yeah.
Wow.
So Lisa's on there, yeah.
Wow, good. And then Shockwave too. Were there any additional vocals listed? Do you know offhand?
No, because I haven't seen because there weren't proper credits for Shockwave. I haven't seen
Yeah.
any full credits, but it would make sense because they'd all been. You'd think, wouldn't you? Because they were like all being recorded at the same time.
Yeah. Kay mentioned these are like an opera voice appears in the song. He wanted to know if it was Sheena or an opera singer or maybe a technical sound.
From what I remember, Shockwave was all Sheena vocals.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Could well been, yeah. I don't what the opera voices in Shockwave.
I think it was more. It sounded like somebody talking on it. I thought,
okay.
wasn't it when it's like Shockwave? He hit me like a
Yeah,
shockwave.
Shockwave, it hit me like a shockwave. That's her.
Really? They just probably played with the machine.
Yeah, it's like a robotic sound. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, see, one thing I came across which I thought was quite interesting is that two of the songs on the album, "What If We Fall in Love" and what's the other one? "Want to Give My Love." "Want to Give My Love."
Yeah.
Those both appeared on an album that came out the previous year. They both appeared on Crystal Gale's album with Gary Morris. And "What If We Fall in Love" wasn't written to be a duet. Interesting fact.
Wow.
And then some of these songs wound up after the fact. We know that "Still in Love" was produced by Narada, and he brought that track to Patti LaBelle after Sheena had recorded it.
And same track, right? I mean, was it the same track? It sounded exactly like
it wasn't quite the same. I think they re-recorded it, but same arrangement. You're right.
Yeah.
The story he told me was that like the label told him they weren't going. "Still in Love" was one of his favorites he did with her.
Yeah.
And he was told by the label they weren't going to use that track. They were dropping it from the album. Of course, it did end up on the album. But see, this is a part of this is quite interesting because it goes to show what a disarray this whole process and this whole production album was. Narada does the track, then he finds out they've rejected it, which he's really disappointed about. So then he's working with Patti LaBelle, and he's like, "Oh, I've got this great track." And so he recuts it on Patti LaBelle. Then Patti LaBelle calls him and says she's heard Sheena Easton's version on holiday somewhere. I think he said in Italy. Patti's furious with him. So and anyway, we had this whole conversation about that thing. And that came about because the label had told him they weren't going to use it. And of course, they did end up putting it out.
Jeez.
Not in America, but in other countries.
Okay.
And so he ends up with two versions of the same songs, two very similar arrangements. Obviously,
and he also did the same with Pia Zadora. He had produced her album, I think, the year after, and he took "Floating Hearts" to her. Oh. So, he wrote both the songs, so it was smart of him too, because he, gets publishing for whoever. So he wouldn't want to waste those songs, and they're great songs. So I never heard Pia Zadora's version of it, but I knew that
I've never heard her version, and she's not she's not. I'd be interested to hear it.
Yeah.
I don't know if that could be the same story with that. Maybe that was the same story, possibly. That "Floating Hearts" had a question mark over it at a certain point, so he recut it. Could be.
Well, he was right. It wasn't released here in the States, so.
Well, Celine Dion did "The Last to Know," right, as well.
Right. Yeah.
He did, yeah.
Chris Neal brought to her. Probably he had heard this.
Yeah.
Probably "The Last to Know." I wonder who that was written, but I bet he brought that to Sheena. And that's probably how he knew that song.
That would make sense, wouldn't it? Because obviously he was still very much following what was happening with Sheena at the time.
Yeah.
And so he would have been aware of that song.
Right.
Last to Know, yeah. Who did write that? Phil Gladstone wrote that.
Brock Walsh.
Was that actually was it a single for Celine Dion?
No, not here in the US it wasn't. I don't know if it was in the UK, but it wasn't.
Was that her first album or her second? Her first. Right?
Yeah.
Her first English language album.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think she had several albums before that were in French, but it was her first big. It was 1990.
Yeah.
Her album Unison, which was like a big push, and the first time she'd done a whole album in English.
Wow.
Oh, it was a single. Yeah, it was a single.
In the U.S.?
No, not in the US. It was the fourth single from an album in Canada.
Canada, of course. Which, ironically, after I picked up Sheena's cassette, I went to a bar, and who was performing there in the bar as a little girl? Celine Dion.
Stop.
Swear to God.
Singing The Last to Know.
No. She was singing songs in French. It was just unbelievable. My friend and I looked like, who the hell is this? She was incredible.
The Last to Know got to #1 in Quebec.
This was before she became famous.
It was a #1 hit. Number 60. They have there's so many different Canadian charts. I'm not sure which one's which, but there's a specific Quebec one where it was #1. It was top 10 in their singles chart, and it was number 22 on the adult contemporary chart in the US.
Wow.
So it was released in the US.
Wow. Jeez.
You know, it's interesting too, even with the Patti LaBelle song. Yeah, we never heard it. I never heard The Last to Know on the radio. Where did it go on the US? Where did it go? What number?
22 on the AC chart.
Wow. Yeah, never heard it.
No.
The Patti LaBelle song. Yeah. Just she I feel like Celine and Patti must have heard Sheena's version when they were recording the songs, because they mimic the vocal performance like to the T. Even the ad libs toward the end are the same ad libs. So it's interesting to me. I guess Patti was just upset. Maybe she heard Sheena's version, but then was told, no, it's not going to be released. And then she wounds up hearing it in another country, and that's why she was upset. But
that is the impression I got from the way he told the story. It was like she was hearing it for the first time. She had no idea anyone else had recorded it before.
That's interesting.
That's the way he told the story. But so in Celine's version, the album, it would have been out.
Right.
It was years ago, so there was no, so there was definitely.
Well, we're name dropping here so much. Celine Dion, Crystal Gayle.
You say you just walked into a bar in 1986.
Yes.
And there was Celine Dion.
It was ridiculous. It was a huge bar. They had a big stage, the band, everything, and she was singing, and we didn't know who it was because her voice was ridiculous and she was young.
Yeah.
She had long hair, and we asked, and they said Celine Dion, and then I think it was like a year later. Was it Broken Hearts Go or something?
Yeah, whatever.
That was the first big hit.
And we looked, we were like, oh my God, that was her.
It's interesting because Celine obviously became such a big star a few years after this album. And the kind of star, and then Whitney, Whitney was already having hits at this point, wasn't she? But the kind of music that people like Celine were making, it's such an area that Sheena was capable of.
Yeah.
Should have had huge success in.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And had in the past, but in that era when those kind of singers became very popular, you'd think it would have been a perfect time for that somehow.
Yeah, I think that's part of what hurt her career. Is that I always felt like, we've talked about this before, that they were trying so hard to make her a youthful artist that I think they kind of lost what was special about her, which was that she could do everything. And I think that they could have still retained moving her in a more youthful manner, but still having ballads and still having adults in part of that fan base. I think they just tried just too hard because really, like we've talked about, there was no ballad released as a single from Almost Over You until I think To Anyone, which is like, almost 10 years. And that's such a travesty when it comes to Sheena Easton, who has magic with a ballad,
Yeah, and if you think about it, it's incredible that Almost Over You, considering that all the hits she'd had in the early part, Almost Over You was the last hit ballad she had. She never had another hit ballad after that.
No.
And she recorded so much great material in that area.
Right.
That's true, yeah.
But they were never managed to make any of them a hit.
No. They could have had hits with Hard to Say It's Over. They could have had a hit with Magic of Love. They could have had a hit with Follow My Rainbow. You know, there were songs that were ballads that could have been big hits,
great
could have
song.
established her as an artist like Whitney Houston and Phil Collins. And
I mean, Follow My Rainbow, especially. I mean, Follow My Rainbow
yeah.
was a love theme from a hit TV show.
Yeah. Could have
And
made
they
a
had all that
lot on
momentum
that
with
one.
album. Why didn't MCA put out Follow My? They did actually put it out as a single, but why didn't they manage to get that? Yeah, it's intriguing. All the
well, it wasn't. They didn't put it as a single here in the U.S. I think they did internationally somewhere, but not the U.S. They only released the up-tempo songs from that album.
Right. So I want to drive a little bit to the left. You know, we talked about Martika, we talked about Patti LaBelle, and of course Sheena on their combination with Prince. You were also working on another project that was just released.
Yes.
Called Dearly Beloved. And tell us about that.
Oh, well, yeah, it's interesting. Dearly Beloved, yeah. So this is, here it is.
Yes.
So basically it's a 3 CD set of, it's a Prince songbook.
Yes.
And it's something I've been working on. It just came out. It's also sold out.
Yeah.
But they are.
Oh, great.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's sold out within a couple of weeks coming out. So there'd never been a really comprehensive compilation done of Prince's songs recorded by other people.
Yeah.
And so I started this idea a few years ago. It's taken absolutely ages to get it together because all the tracks are from have to be licensed from here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah.
Different labels. Some of them are owned by the artists themselves. And so each of those has to be sorted out to assemble it. And in the end, ends up with 52 tracks. The first disc is all the songs that he wrote and produced. He wrote, or I shouldn't say he wrote for other artists, because sometimes a song, even like Manic Monday, he didn't actually write that for the Bangles. He actually wrote it a couple of years earlier and recorded it with Apollonia 6. And then gave it to the Bangles. They didn't find, but only years later did it become clear that he hadn't actually written it specifically for them. But certainly, the first disc has songs that were first recorded by the other artists, like the Martika song.
Yes.
Or They Will Be Done, or Yo Mister by Patti LaBelle, or there's even a Paul Abdul one on there called You, Rosie Gaines, all these types of people.
Bette Midler is Bette Midler on that?
No, Bette Midler isn't on there, sadly. Bette never did. Bette wanted to record a Prince song, didn't she?
Oh, I thought she did. She didn't actually. Okay.
No, she never did.
An interview.
Once, and she talked about how much she loved.
Well,
and in fact, I think in the interview they say to her, she's like, "I love Prince. I wish you'd do a song for me." And I think is it Arsenio Hall?
Yes, that's the one I was just going to bring up. Yep.
With her like, Sugar Walls. She's like, "No, not that one."
No. She's like,
that's right.
No, I don't think I could do that one.
But she said,
did a wonderful job with it.
She said, "Oh, are you kidding me? Do you listen to the songs he wrote for Sheena Easton?" And that's when Arsenio goes, "Oh, Sugar Walls. No, not that one." So she must have been aware of the other songs that they recorded together.
Yeah. But he never actually did. There were quite a few people that he was that wanted to work with him that never happened. Even there's a Kylie Minogue one I think he wrote for her, and Joni Mitchell. There was other people that never happened.
Oh, Bonnie Raitt, right? Bonnie Raitt.
Bonnie Raitt as well. Yeah.
God,
I mean, everyone wanted to work with him.
Yeah.
I think one of the amazing things about Hit Prince is that how diverse, how the songs lend themselves to so many different genres. Because people just think of Prince in terms of the funk, which of course was a huge part of it. But on this particular compilation, it ranges from like some are jazz, some are kind of electronic, some are sort of rock, there's just such a huge range of genres that his music.
I love how you grouped it out with each disc and how it, like, can you explain that a little bit? Because it's really cool. Like you had the songs that he wrote for
other artists,
specifically for artists or that sounded like they were written for them.
Yeah, right? So that's the first disc, which is the ones that were sort of first recorded by the artist. He never released it himself, or no one else did. They were the first release of that song that he gave to other artists. Like "If I Love You Tonight" by Misha Paris is another one. And also going on to later ones, like there's a singer who I spoke to about called Shelby J, who was his backing singer for years. They wrote a song together called North Carolina, which is great. It was a duet with Anthony Hamilton. That's on there. So that's the first disc. And on the second and third disc, they're all cover versions. The second disc is more leaning towards R&B. So you've got things like Melissa Morgan, Do Me
Baby, yeah.
R&B hit for her, number one hit for her. Stephanie Mills is on there with How Come You Don't Call Me Anymore. Pointer Sisters, their version of I Feel For You.
I Feel For You,
yeah.
And then on the third disc, it's more odd.
Like alternative, right?
Yeah, like alternative electronica. Some of them are like, there's an amazing artist called Lamb Chop, who's like an alt country kind of thing. He did a version of When You Were Mine. And then there's sort of like a bebop version of Sign of the Times by a Scottish band called Hue and Cry that were quite successful in the 80s in Britain. And there's a whole range of stuff, which is like from electronic to big band jazz to alt country to it's a whole range of stuff.
Eclectic.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. Actually, I think it's amazing. Going through sequencing the album was a big was a challenge. Was interesting and challenging in that way to make it make sense musically, so you don't just go from one thing to another and it sounds like a mess. So I had to rethink about that.
Well, you did a great job.
Thank you. I mean, one of the things as well that's interesting about Prince, and when you think about it as a songwriter, is when he was establishing himself in the 80s, how important that was to the understanding of the public of Prince, because he didn't really have his, obviously the 1990, I Want to Be Your Lover was a big hit, but then it wasn't until a few years later that he had hits from 1999, and then the Purple Rain album, that was it. It was all over. He was an international superstar. So those records like Sugar Walls with Sheena and the Bangles was a little bit later, but they were so important in people actually understanding him. Like, oh, that's the same guy. So the same guy that did this also did that. And it sort of built up. And the songs like Do Me Baby with Melissa Morgan becoming a number one hit on R&B, they all added to this momentum of him establishing himself as this like kind of, who is this guy? He can do everything.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
I can't think of another artist like that.
Yeah, he was ahead of his time. Yeah.
And in Sheena's, I guess, credit, she worked with him prior to the Purple Rain soundtrack being released, the movie being released. So she just loved that 1999 album, and so she was the first one to establish artists to tap him as a writer. And and that's,
in fact, she was the first artist to have a top 10, or was it even top 5, top 10 American hit with one of his songs that wasn't him.
Right.
Well, right, but on the R&B charts, I think it went even higher, right?
And the R&B charts, it went high. Yeah, it did.
Yeah, number 3.
3, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the most, the established artists who worked with him the most.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. Yeah, over that whole decade. Yeah. Exactly. He kept coming back, and they had that working relationship for years. Yeah, it's a shame they never did a whole album together. Really.
Yeah,
there's those tracks out there. I know there are.
There's at least one we know of, but right, two actually. There's 2 we know.
2. Yeah, there are 2 that are talked about, but who knows? There could be more.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. There probably is a whole lot more, just from those little calls that he would bring her into the studio and probably testing out stuff that never even got released.
Yeah.
And of course, there's a famous with "You Got the Look," which we mentioned earlier, which came out at the same time as this album, as No Sound But Heart. That song was just a last minute thing with him happening to be in LA. And she's talked about this. He would, when he was in town, he would call her and say, "Can you come down?" Sometimes she could, and sometimes she couldn't. And she wouldn't have ended up on that song. It wasn't like he wrote it to be a duet with her.
Right.
He just asked her to come down, and she did backing vocals. And then she ended up famously singing off the beat or not in the way he liked it. And they thought, actually, this can work. And they developed, and it got developed into a duet.
Yeah. She just actually did an interview and talked about that exact experience, that it was just, hear what I'm doing. Come on over. I want you to hear this track. And then why don't you just do some background vote? And then it turned into the duet. And it's interesting because this album was never released, and it was actually pulled, I think, from shelves in Canada. So you were very lucky to find it, when
Oh,
you did. But
very lucky.
they actually went and pulled it from record stores, I think, in Canada.
Oh, did they? Why?
Because they weren't allowed to sell it. So it wasn't going to be released, and it was already shipped to Canada. So record stores had to pull it and send it back to the record company. And that put on hold her recording career. And thankfully, Prince's label decided to release You Got the Look in the fall of '87. And she shot a video for that. She got the endorsement deal with Jack LaLanne. So that made her very prominent in the United States with television commercials during primetime shows. And then she landed the acting job on Miami Vice. And those three things
Kept her.
In the worst year of her recording career, right? Not having an album released, being on hold, that's kept her profile. Probably, she made the People magazine, the cover of People magazine, and she on Us magazine, the year-end, year-out edition, they said they had a picture of Madonna. It said out. They had a picture of Sheena. It said in.
Remember that.
They would have an in and out year, who was out and who was in. So it really elevated her profile with these other things that were happening in her career. It was just one of those, combination of smart business moves and luck and fate. And it kept her in
She
the
was
spot.
always like that, even in '82 when Madness, Money and Music took a little dive, and then she was doing Bob Hope. She was doing We've Got Tonight. She kept herself in the spotlight until something else peaked.
Yeah.
Yeah. And had the ability to do that as well,
Mhm.
I think. The kind of the talent to do all these different things,
Regardless of who her management was.
We talked about the Act One thing as well. Before.
Yeah, another one.
That was kind of very much like the kind of TV special that had been made even 10 or 20 years before. Not the material, but the approach kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
Pull that off as well. Even at very, very young, only a few years into her career. She had all this ability and, it's incredible.
That's the Taurus.
Yeah.
Keep moving.
But sometimes things didn't line up. Like that Prince hit, she wasn't credited on that, was she? It wasn't like it wasn't credited.
No, and I don't know that she could have been because of the label entanglement, but she was credited on the album sleeve, in the inner album sleeve, as backing vocals. But I think for some reason, they couldn't say featuring Sheena Easton on the single release because of what she was going through with EMI at that time.
But still noticed at the Grammys, right? Is duet.
It was. She got nominated for best vocal performance by a duo, R&B vocal performance by a duo for her and Prince. So
how great would that have been? Mexican, American, R&B, pop, right? So Adam, Dearly Beloved and No Sound But a Heart are both available. Well, they were sold out on cherryred.co.uk. Could visit again. They might get restocked, but you could get them on Amazon.com.
Yes.
Anything else we could expect coming up?
Is there anything you can talk about for 2025?
There's nothing scheduled yet for 2025, but there's definitely stuff I'm working on with Sheena.
Okay.
And I hope people will be happy. There is a lot of unreleased material that will hopefully see the light of day. And also, there will be CD. I know some people like vinyl, some people like CD, and people get upset if things come out on vinyl and it comes. But I can definitely say that everything that's been come out on vinyl, only on vinyl so far in this session, will be out on CD.
Okay.
In that format. Yeah.
Possible box set.
Last leg of this. Yeah. Not necessarily all as but in different. Yeah. But all the exactly how and what it will be, I'm not. I can't really say yet until it's all signed off and done. And but it's all coming. Things are coming.
No box set, right yet?
No, everything is all in process at the moment.
Okay.
So nothing I can announce.
We can take that. We still get Adam. We're happy with that.
That's right.
Well, hopefully I'll be back in the first half of next year at some point too.
Yes.
When finally when the next thing is out.
Please, absolutely. And anything that you bring to us, we're so excited just to have you on.
Thank you. And thanks for having me.
I can't believe
when is Record Store Day, by the way?
April. It's usually in April, yeah. April 2024. But we don't have anything in 2024, obviously. We're talking about April 2024. Yeah. But there won't be anything for Record Store Day. There was an idea, there was a concept that I had in mind, to be honest, but there was something that's going to happen potentially, but for various reasons it's not going to happen. So there's no point in talking about that. But yeah, Record Store Day is happening, but there won't be any Sheena release.
That's amazing. Adam, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you.
We adore you. Happy holidays.
Yeah, happy holidays.
Yes, enjoy.
Okay, this was a great little Christmas present for us, having you on again.
Thank you. Thank you.
We need to send you an award.
Yes, for the loosest lips.
The loosest
I will be very happy to give you that title.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Adam.
Okay, see you
You're
next
the
time.
best, Adam. We
You are.
truly appreciate
Thank you for
it.
making everybody so happy.
Bye.